More than 100,000 veterans make Hawaii their home, making it one of the highest populations of veterans per capita in the nation. Is the Aloha State a veteran-friendly state? Are there enough services and funding here in Hawaii to help those who have served? What are the challenges facing this often neglected community? Tonight's special Veterans Day live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
On this Veterans Day holiday, we start by saying thank you to all who served or are currently serving in the U.S. military. Hawaii is home to more than 100,000 veterans from diverse backgrounds with equally diverse issues: PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance and alcohol abuse, disabilities, thoughts of suicide are just a few of those issues that many veterans deal with. Funding and resource issues for retired service members can often complicate these challenges. Is the country doing enough for our servicemen and women? What can each of us do in the community to help our veterans? We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email us or call us with your questions. We also encourage you to get involved with the conversation on our Facebook page. Now to our guests. Deborah Lewis is a retired Army colonel and among the first women to graduate from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. She is currently the department commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hawaii, with members across Hawaii and in American Samoa. Adam Robinson is the director of the VA Veterans Affairs Pacific Islands Healthcare System. A Navy veteran, Dr. Robinson has more than 30 years of experience as a senior leader in the United States military healthcare system, including serving as the 36th Surgeon General of the U.S. Navy. Ronald Hahn is a retired Air Force colonel and is the director of the State Office of Veterans Affairs. He is also board trustee and the vice chair for the Finance Committee for the Hawaii Veterans Memorial Fund and a member of the University of Hawaii Task Force for Student Veterans. Sergio Chao is a veteran of the United States Army and is currently the director of the Honolulu Veterans Affairs Regional Office. He oversees the administration of federal benefits to the thousands of veterans and their dependents in his region. And let me start off by thanking all of you for your service in the military and your continuing service to our veterans here in this state. Let me start off, Deb, with you. 100,000 veterans is a lot, but that means 900,000 people who aren't veterans live in this state. Tell us, can you just help us define what is a veteran when it comes to the service and what is a veteran when it comes to benefits that they might be entitled to?
Well, I think that anyone who has served, especially on Veterans Day, which is what we're honoring today, is anyone who has served in uniform. And whether that's for just a minimum tour, like a couple years, or whether that is for a lifetime of service. Some people have done over 40 years. I did 34. It's when you have worn the uniform and you swore to defend the Constitution of the United States and defend it with your life if necessary. So benefits is a different story. So if you want me to go into that, I can, but the other gentlemen who are here are very versed in that. But the idea is, I was an inspector general, so it depends. It depends on the question as to what benefits that you get, and you have to be asking certain questions. It's not a given, but we're very happy for the community, such as McDonald's and the other places, and Home Depot and places that are constantly giving us benefits each day for our veterans who served in uniform.
Adam Robinson, I think the benefits that most people who are familiar with it would think of as medical benefits. And what is the promise that this country makes to service people who are hurt, who are harmed in war? What is the promise our country makes to them and their families if that terrible thing happens?
So thank you very much for having me this evening. I think the motto for the Veterans Health Administration is taken from the Lincoln 1864 inaugural address, when he said that we would make sure that we take care of the widow and the orphan, and also the men and women who have been wounded and who have both physical, the seen injuries of war, but also now we can see the unseen injuries of war, those unseen injuries that cause psychological, moral, spiritual damage to our veterans. And we need to make sure that we are there full time to honor them and also to care for them.
You know, that's been a really evolving, controversial subject because I remember covering the Agent Orange issue, right, where people were complaining about something that in the military was saying, well, no, that, resisted that. Is the military better, or is the VA better now at recognizing early on that there might be problems that they aren't familiar with?
Oh, I can only tell you that it is an evolving administration, and this is both for VHA, the Veterans Health, but also Veterans Benefits. We must constantly be on the alert, aware of new and evolving conditions and problems that may be occurring with our veterans. And I think that I'll just reference one thing quickly. 1946, the best years of our lives, an Academy Award-winning movie. That movie, if you have seen it, discusses both the visible and the invisible injuries of war, but no one said it at that time. So these are things that have been known for the last century, but we are now beginning to talk about it openly and tell people that if they're having issues and everyone who has been in combat or who served in a war zone has injury or has some harm that may have occurred with them. So we're getting much better at opening the aperture of what we understand as injury and also making sure that we can take care of those men and women who may have suffered it.
Sergio Chow, you handle the benefit side, the financial benefit side. Can you help me understand, is it, like we've talked about retirement, military retirement, we many of us know military retirees who've been able to retire early enough that they're now doing a second career, that sort of thing. Who is entitled to continuing financial support after they leave the military? Is it just retirees, or are there other people short of retirement who are entitled to that kind of benefits?
Hi, Daryl. First of all, thank you for having me tonight. And no, it doesn't matter how long you serve on active duty. If you were incurred an injury or disease while you were on active duty, you are entitled to compensation benefits. But again, it depends on what benefits we're talking about here. I mean, but compensation is our bread and butter, right? And compensation is monetary benefits. And again, for an injury or disease incurred while on active duty, and this includes, like Dr. Robinson was saying, the unseen conditions like mental disabilities, right? And so, but no, it's irrespective of how long you served. Veterans are entitled. And to me, one of the biggest challenges that I see is the need for education, educating our soldiers, our public, as to what's out there, who's entitled to it, because it can be a source of much frustration if you don't understand what's happening. But I can tell you, going back to kind of a question that you asked Adam earlier, in the 22 years that I've been with the VA, I have seen a huge shift. I can only tell you personally, my service, I was discharged in '96. And maybe because of the circumstances, when I got out, I was deployed my last 8 months. And so I only had time to go back to the rear, clean my weapon, and come back to the U.S. And I never had any tab briefing as to VA benefits. I didn't know anything about VA. And so it was until a couple of years later that I learned about it. Now, this year, nowadays, I feel strongly, I don't know how the other gentlemen here feel about it, and lady, but I believe our current generation of soldiers definitely knows more about VA benefits on their way out as they're transitioning than some of the soldiers themselves, were way before us, what they knew about it. And I think it also has to do with the tab briefings that they're required to do as they get out of the military. And plus, it's so known now, right? The media has made it so much more widely known. And but I think education is a huge thing for our veterans.
Ronald Hahn, from the state office, tell us a little bit about the population of veterans here in Hawaii. We all know, of course, about the exploits of the 442nd and 100th Battalion. Most of them, by now there's very few of them left. But, we had Korea, we had Vietnam, we had Iraq, Afghanistan, many things. What is our makeup of our veterans in Hawaii now, that huge number, 100,000?
Yeah, again, thank you so much, Dow, for bringing this panel together, especially on this special day. So that 100,000 number, and one of the things that I appreciate hearing from all my colleagues And I like what Deb said about the actual definition of that veteran, those who put on that uniform and serve their country. But there's been so much now diversity in the ranks. For example, you know, I've got a reserve commission, got a regular commission, became part of the National Guard. All my time's been on active duty. And so what that's created was a lot of the folks in the National Guard are almost the first to fight now. And they've been on multiple deployments, the reserve been in multiple deployments. So it's almost colorless now as to when a veteran comes in. Now, there's no two veterans alike. Each have separate type of benefits and entitlements. They have to be worked in a very caring and very forthright way to be able to help them navigate through the things that need to be done. And so Hawaii really is no different. So then when you add in all the 50,000 active duty members that are here by every service component, they're all veterans or will be veterans. And you got about 6,000 National Guard and reservists in addition to the retirees. That's a huge populace that's out there. And then you have all these transgenerational folks that you mentioned about, Darryl. You know, World War II veterans, the greatest generation. They're finally getting due recognition. Think about this now. Almost 80 years later, Congressional Gold Medal for our Filipino veterans, Congressional Gold Medal for our Chinese World War II veterans, for our Nisei veterans. 80 years later, it's just incredible. And they are the ones that helped us to have all the things that we have here today. I mean, there have been so many tremendous sacrifices for all of us who are in the Gulf War era. You know, we were able to stand on their shoulders, our Korean War vets, our Vietnam War vets, World War II vets, and we've had it a lot more easier. So I think for this panel, we want to make it ready and better for that next generation that's already serving today.
Let me ask, Deb Lewis, so what do you see as the biggest challenges now? As you represent these veterans, I imagine you help a lot of them try to access and understand their benefits and so on. What do you see as the biggest challenge these days? Is it the extreme age of many veterans and that kind of care, or is it more these other traumas that they've endured in multiple deployments? So, what would you say is the biggest of those problems, and are the things that public probably doesn't know that's out there?
I think one of the biggest problems is whatever the need is the public doesn't really know how easy it is to help. You know, we are a community. All of us are complementary in helping each other. We have state organizations, we have federal organizations, and we represent a nonprofit organization that was actually approved by Congress. So we have we're not a 501c3, I think we're 501c3 18 or 19. But the issue is that they have to have someone who can speak for them and interpret for them. And we have a variety of programs and services that we offer, sometimes to navigate their benefits, sometimes to just be a person to talk to because they may not be comfortable talking to someone who hasn't served in the military. And we try to make sure that we can steer them and help them navigate that difficult system that you heard Ron talk about. It is a challenge, but the idea is people can help each of these veterans in order to understand how can they be helped. But even more important, I think today, is veterans aren't victims. Veterans can be empowered. They know how to serve. They've gone in that role before, and we want to empower them to be able to care for themselves, have a quality of life, and be supported. And so we love the fact that we say we do more for veterans, you know, every day. And that's because we have service officers who direct them in the channels. And they don't have to pay for that service. There are other people out there. Please tell your audience, they don't have to pay for someone to describe what their benefits are. People will say that, and they don't have the authority. You need properly trained people. So there's a lot of myths out there as well, as the final point I want to make, is that sometimes veterans say, well, I don't deserve it, or somebody else needs it more than me, or maybe one of these organizations, they're trying to take our money or, you know, keep it from me. Those are all myths. We are working hard to try to support this team that you see in front of you, and I'm so blessed to be a part of this group. We are all trying to work together to meet exactly what you've asked about. Is what is the greatest problem is we all must work together in order to support each veteran's different needs.
Adam Robinson, you made an interesting comment a few minutes ago, and I want to make sure I heard this correctly. Did you say that every person who's served and gone into combat has been injured in some way or another? And I guess the people supporting them, in that's a very powerful statement, because there is this responsibility that the rest of us have to support them who've been injured. Is that a new understanding, that you cannot go into combat and not be injured in some way, either psychologically, emotionally, or physically?
I think that that is absolutely true. And I can tell you, as a physician and as someone who spent 34 years on active duty in the military and the Navy, and the psychologists and the psychiatrists and the physicians that we sent into Afghanistan and Iraq and into the different trauma hospitals, there have been numerous books and studies that have been done that prove quite conclusively, from my point of view, that anyone who gets into a war situation, a combat situation, has an inalterable emotional and psychological, it has an unalterable emotional and psychological effect. And in fact, I would suggest that they have had a traumatic experience, and from that can develop other types of syndromes, such as post-traumatic stress. I'm not saying everyone there has it, but we have very often neglected to recognize that men and women who have been in war and been in terribly chaotic and destructive situations aren't affected. And because of that, we have really neglected to care for them. We have neglected to understand that it's not something you come back and shake off, or you can just, you stop thinking about it. It doesn't work that way. Your mind doesn't work that way. I'd like to also make just a quick comments. I love the group that we're with, and Deb, I too am blessed to be with this group, and am blessed to be here in the VA. Our veterans need to not think that they do not qualify for care. Please call and ask. You must ask the question, and do not assume that you're not qualified for care, or you're better off than most. Why should I get that? All of us have needs, and the VA, as an example, and I think that the Veterans of Foreign Wars and also Ron Hahn's Hawaii Veterans Group, we are all here to help. And one must reach out. If we know who you are, of course we'll call you. But if we don't know who you are, please call us. We can help you. And again, it's free. There's nothing we're asking except to be able to sit with you and talk with you and see what we can do to help you. And if you're not integrated back into your community appropriately, we would like to make sure that you do.
I want to, there's so many questions that you guys are provoking in my head, and I really appreciate it. We'll explore many of these things further, but I did get two questions in a row about a great tragedy in this country, and that is veterans' homelessness. And I remember at the beginning of the homeless crisis, there was a lot of very high-level predictions that this was at least one aspect of homelessness that could be conquered. Ronald Hahn, representing Hawaii veterans in particular, here's a question of Ellie and Uanu. Given that so many veterans are homeless, what is the VA doing for them? And Mark and Kailua, how does a homeless vet get help? Where do they start?
So, it's interesting, and thank you for your questions out there. I think I've been in this job since 2011, and the numbers were fairly high as far as veterans on the street. Back in 2015, the numbers were starting to come down just a little bit more. To where we're at today, from 2015 to 2021, there's been about a 25% reduction in our homeless veterans. Most of them are now in shelters. And so we're still working on the unsheltered ones. There's a lot of partners of care, the community of care networks that are out there that are very, very supportive. And I'll say this with a great deal of respect for our veterans. Veterans have to be willing to receive the help. I have seen it in person, Sergio Chow and Dr. Robinson's people go out with our people on the streets and meet with veterans one-on-one and be able to say, we need to do these things for you. And I've actually seen some of the veterans kind of push back because of their way of living, the way what they're used to. And so there are so many programs that the VA offers. You know, the VA HUD VASH program, they can put up our veterans in wonderful, you know, apartments, Housing First initiative to get them off the street and provide wraparound services. You got the U.S. Vets, a private nonprofit that's out there that offers so many great opportunities, even for their families. I mean, there should be no reason why our veterans should be on the street unless they choose to be out there. And again, understanding the sensitivities of that, we just keep working it. And it's everybody's responsibility. It's not a state responsibility. It's not a VA responsibility. It's not a VSO responsibility. It's an entire community that needs to recognize that and work it that way.
Sergio Chow, thanks, Ron Hahn, for mentioning that. What is that conversation like when you're face to face with a veteran on the street who may be resistant, or, and along with that question, is there a place for every one of those veterans to live if you could get them to accept it?
I don't know. I can answer the second one as to is there a place for them to live. What I try to do on the benefit side is try to put money in their hands. That's what we do, whether it's compensation or whether it's pension. Put money in their hands. Now, how far that money goes in Hawaii versus other parts of the country, I don't know. But that our role is to do that, and then of course we work really close with Adam Robinson's team, and they take care of the medical side aspect and also the hot vash, like Ron was saying. But like Ron said, everybody plays an integral part. And you need to understand that we're not also on every single island, or at least the Benefits Administration. We have an office here in Honolulu is the main hub, but also only have employees in Maui and Hilo when it comes to Hawaii. So Lanai, Molokai, and Kauai depend on us traveling there to be able to meet with those veterans. So we really need the folks on the ground there, like Deb and the other VSOs that are out there and Ron's team, to help us. They're a force multiplier basically, and reach back to us and say, we need help. Here's who we found. Let's see what we can do for them. And that is that collaboration that is so important, and that you need to have in the community in order for us to be successful.
Adam Robinson, you wanted to add something to that?
I did, because, and everyone is right on point with this. The Veterans Health Administration has a very robust homeless veterans program, and we have the same that occurs here. Just a couple of points. Everyone has already pointed this out. Everyone who is homeless doesn't necessarily want to receive the help or the care. And they have to want to do that, because we can't make them receive the care. There is a major mental health, psychological, emotional component with many homeless, not with all, but with many, and that has to be understood. But just to make sure that we also understand, we are connected with the homeless task force here in Honolulu. We have approximately $1.4 million in grants to fight homelessness, and that is HUD VASH vouchers. There are a number of different things that we can do to help with homeless veterans. Is there a place for every homeless veteran on the street? I'm going to say yes, because there's transitional housing or some sort of housing we could get most every homeless veteran in if they would accept it. The key with homeless veterans is it's not just housing. You need to help them reestablish their life in this regard. Most need to have identification. They need to have driver's licenses. They need to have an address. They may need to reestablish a financial bank accounts, but a financial system of one sort or another. And this is a process that our mental health specialists, our social workers deal with. It's complex. it's very successful, and the VA has done a great job across the United States, and I think that we do a good job here. There is no job that we're doing that cannot be improved, and there's not every veteran that we have reached and have been successful with. But I would say in total, we are reducing veteran homelessness, and we are getting it to a point where we really have assets, people, and help available, but it's a community effort, and it is not just a VA effort. It really takes the whole of the community to work with us.
Deb Lewis from Veterans Affordable Homes, what's your perspective on the homeless veterans issue? I know that it's kind of a shame that we end up having to talk so much about this because, nobody wants to have a label stuck on them that says I'm a homeless because I'm a veteran or anything like that. But what kind of things are happening, do you think, in the homeless issue that are either making progress or just a much tougher slog than we thought?
If I may answer this question, kind of complementing how the others addressed it, it is a complex issue. It sounds like, well, you just need shelter. Well, that's not the answer. I worked hard with someone. We shipped him to his sister who could care. The whole network on our island worked to get a flight to get him there, coordinated and into the VA system. And then he came back and he's living in a terrible hovel. And I just got word on that. And we have a program to do it. So we have to get beyond saying one size fits all. And the community effort is really just that. We've had veteran, as a nonprofit group, we can actually go to where people live. We do that. And they have some special programs that do that. But I know a veteran and the family, they had to leave Hawaii quickly. And they had to sell their house and get rid of the contents immediately. Well, who would you trust? And they came and they turned to our auxiliary, which is the families of veterans, and they made that happen. So I guess in answering your question, I just would say it is a community effort. Please look for those veteran support organizations in your community. You can work the system for what you're authorized, but just like the Veterans Treatment Court, if you've heard about that system, you find that veterans, if they're struggling and they have mental issues, they'll turn to something, to drugs or alcohol or whatever, or accidents and things. They'll get into the court system. But what we've discovered is that when you provide a network to support them, they are the fastest ones able to get back on track because they have accountability, they have, a holistic approach. It has to be for that veteran. And we will continue, the team that you see here will continue to work that. But unless we're supported, it's not going to happen. Last point, I had over 100 veterans displaced because of the lava flow. Over 100. And they were, some of the support that came in was delayed and other things. Well, we have what's called an Unmet Needs Fund where we've had many sponsors donate generously. Well, they furnished us $25,000 immediately, and the team from Hawaii, the department, came over to us, and then other posts around the nation. There's almost 6,000 posts across the nation, and they donated money so that we could hand veterans immediately some relief, even if it's just for gas, for whatever, because they lost everything. And so again, it's a community effort. I highly encourage veterans and their families to join a group that can help you understand the system because they've been there, they've lived it, and they've done it. And I think that when we work together, there's not a single problem that can't be solved.
You brought up a great point, and it's a nice segue to another thing we want to talk about after talking about the issues that veterans face. Part of that discussion should include families of veterans who in many ways also deserve our thanks for their service. Following Insights is a documentary called Sky Blossom Diaries of the Next Greatest Generation about young caregivers helping family members who are veterans, including a family on Kauai.
I'm Kamaile Kapanui. I'm 26 years old, and it's getting kind of crazy with Grandpa. It's just because he's forgetful. In his world, things are going a little bit differently.
Okay, I'll take him outside.
He's not allowed in here.
Hello.
I try not to leave him home alone for more than an hour. So if I'm not working, I'm usually hanging out here.
Last fall, I took 6 classes, and then I worked 40 hours roughly a week. I was at work when my dad called me and told me that they were going to have to take his leg.
For 40-some years, I've had a right foot and been able to drive a truck. Now I can't do that. They put me on disability. Jenna welcomed it with open arms and said, "Okay, Dad, I'll do the best I can to help you out." She makes all my doctor's appointments.
Making sure he has medicine.
She knows more what medicines I take than I do.
19 different pills, along with 4 shots of insulin daily. My dad took care of me my first 18 years. The least I could do is step down on the step and let him put his hand on my shoulder, you know?
The Unmet program, Sky Blossom Diaries of the Next Greatest Generation, will air right after this show in about half an hour here on PBS Hawaii. Sergio Chow is the benefits guy, and you did mention earlier when we were talking before the show about Caregiver Program. Is there help out there for people who are really stepping up and taking care of their family members who are, facing dementia or disability, severe disability? What's there for those families?
So Daryl, I'm gonna have to defer that to Adam. The Caregiver Program falls under the Health Administration, and so I'm gonna let him address that. We definitely provide benefits and to the veterans themselves, and as well as the fact if there's a dependency, if there's a dependent that they can add to their award, we'll add them to their award. Depending if they're 30% or more disabled, we can add them on and pay money for them too, as well as the children. But when it comes to, I believe what you're referring to, what we just saw on that ad, it's the Caregiver Program that Adam's teams manages.
Okay, Adam Robinson, can you tell me what's out there? These people are providing an essential service to the United States of America in a very direct way.
So the men and women who are caregivers to our veterans, most of them are family, some are not. But for the most part, and I think you'll see in the clip that you showed, we will support them and we will help defer costs that they may incur. And I'm talking about actually payments to them. Additionally, I think in healthcare, the continuum of care is what we look at constantly. So it's not just the patient and the provider, whoever that may be, the nurse or the physical therapist or the occupational therapist. It's also the caregiver at home. As you saw, the daughters were actually doing more of the care of giving medication and making sure that their dads and their veteran fathers were safe. These are the things that we have to do, and that's what we support on the Caregivers Support Program. A couple of things. When we were giving vaccines, it's an interesting phenomenon, but it's very important. We have veterans. When we were giving COVID-19 vaccines or even flu vaccines, we're extending those benefits to caregivers also, because how can you keep the veteran safe if the people who are caring for the veteran isn't safe? I'm talking about the relatives and whoever the caregiver may be. We need to help them pay for the time that they are giving to the veteran, and we are actually supplying that. We have a whole host of caregiver support activities. And the last thing I'll say on this, there are a multitude, but very often the veterans will apply for caregiver support. And then they have to meet certain criteria for that. But I will say to you that as the director of the VA Pacific Islands, I really do try to be very liberal in how I give that care. Now, let me be careful. Everyone can't get it. There are rules and regs regarding it. But I think that when one can look at how they are caring for our veterans and the time that they're putting in and the services that they're providing, I think that they need to be compensated, and I'll do everything I can to make sure that they are cared for because that's essential to that veteran's safety and their well-being. So I think this is just a critical problem. The VA thinks the caregiver support's a critical problem.
Ronald Hahn, we talked earlier about, elderly veterans too, and I'm wondering if that sort of fits into this scenario. I mean, many of us are caring for elderly parents, but someone who's been disabled by their war injury or by the mental or emotional challenges. In Hawaii, how much of that is your challenge as well?
And that's a great question, Daryl. And just to kind of piggyback off of what Dr. Robinson was saying and understanding about the caregiver roles. So when they come in to our offices, or I'm sure Sergio's offices and other areas, oftentimes our generational veterans that you speak of are coming in with a spouse. A lot of times it's a son or a daughter. Sometimes it's a granddaughter or grandson, and they come in. They're not to say veterans at that age are not computer literate. There's a lot of them that are extremely computer literate, but they're coming in to help them, to provide them the kind of data points that they need, because everything's gone so much into the telemedicine and the telecounseling like we do on our side, and teleclaims and all those related things, that oftentimes, we grant them limited power of attorney, so they're able to share some of the HIPAA and the Privacy Act information. But it's that caregiver that Dr. Robinson spoke of that is actually that conduit to be able to help that veteran succeed. And we see that more often. That's why, hats off to the VA for thinking about them as far as the vaccines and the other related things. And I think Sergio them also help provide with aid and attendance. So sometimes the caregiver can't, if you can't fulfill all the needs, you can only do so much. You don't have the medical expertise, and you got to bring in a nurse, or you got to bring in someone else who has to administer a shot or something else of that nature. And there's that compensation again, to being able to bring in a care provider where it alleviate a little bit of the stress and the amount of work that the family member has to go through. So we see that every day, Daryl, but it's so great to see the family, and we encourage that. We want to see more of that, because eventually it helps the veteran in the long run.
Deborah Lewis from VFW, how do you see the family dynamic playing out here? Is this, because I imagine as veterans get older, and we saw that gentleman from Kauai, I mean, I don't think he was all that old, and is there enough support for family members? And again, who do they turn to if they feel they need help, and perhaps the veteran they're helping isn't, plugged into the system well enough?
Well, they should have a veteran center, one, to make sure that they are registered. If the member is not registered with the state and with the federal government, then you're not going to see any benefits coming as a result of that. But once you are, as I mentioned earlier, our veteran support organizations are there to help hold hands and get there, to make sure that they're aware of the program. My father's 95, and he has the caregiver. He gets some benefits from VA for caregiving because he is disabled. And if you have that network, there is a network there, and people are aware, and it is tricky. It is hard to do sometimes, and there can be many steps, but people can hold your hand and help make sure that you have that support. And like I said, we cannot dismiss just the fact of having someone to talk to about the issue. These caregivers that you showed, it's a tremendous stress on their lives. And many of them, the myth is I have to do it alone. Well, no, there are probably people in your community, whether it's your church or a veteran support organization or others, because sometimes all you do is you need to have some time, some relief to make sure that you can be at your best when you're being challenged. For the 100th time, if the goat's in the house, you got to go, you got to take it out. Or if someone has repeated the phrase a million times and you finally get to lose it. And thank goodness for Elizabeth Dole, because she really is the one who has been on the caregiver side. She is the one who really put that in the limelight to say how important it is. And thank goodness VA was able to step into that void and start supporting it. But I think the last thing I'd like to say is just that there are many programs out there, but if you don't ask, you won't find out. And you'd be surprised how much you can help and how much gratitude you'll feel by helping others. And so I just ask people to get informed. Maybe you don't know how to use a computer, but your neighbor is willing to volunteer to help you with a computer, to look at what's available. Like we have vfw.org. There's all things of scholarships and other things that we have on our website, but you won't know unless you have access. So having a phone is not enough anymore. You have to have a link to the internet to be able to understand and start reading about what's going on. So I would encourage your viewers, please, if you know of a veteran, please reach out and help them at a minimum knowing what's available.
Adam Robinson, you wanted to contribute here?
I did, because Deb just said something that was so good, and I wanted to say that we have something called Respite Care for our caregivers. And after they've been on duty, and she's exactly right, it's a burden. It can be very heavy, and they need to have rest. We will help them get the rest. We will help provide coverage for that and give them a break from their duties, because that's the only way that they can actually continue to do that type of work. And the other thing is, just very quickly, this happens to be November is National Family Caregivers Month. And I just wanted to throw that out. So this is something that the VA looks at constantly. And the last thing Deb said, which is so true, and that is, please ask. I just wish people would learn to call and ask, because there's help, and they shouldn't assume that it doesn't matter. It does matter, and we can do that. So thanks very much.
Sergio Chao, all of what we've been talking about is tremendously, I don't mean to be crass, but it's expensive. I mean, are there resources sufficient enough flowing out of the federal government or from wherever to support these programs? Or is there an ongoing struggle in Washington or even locally, or just to get money out of the system? Is there enough money there?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to compensation, pension, none of those benefits, that's guaranteed. We never have to worry about that. Is there enough money for our veterans or not? And since you mentioned that, I mean, just to put it in perspective, as of October 2021, we're paying approximately $51.4 million a month to veterans here in Hawaii only. And I say Hawaii because our office also has jurisdiction for veterans in Guam, the Northern Marianas, and American Samoa. And so, just to put it in context, I mean, it's quite a sizable amount of money going to our veterans and the economy. And so, but no, when it comes to is there enough money? There's not. That's not even a talk. I mean, this is we've been very well supported by Congress. So no.
But let me ask this though: are there unmet needs purely out of the outreach? I won't blame the outreach, because you guys are clearly working on outreach. I mean, that's clear. You're dedicated to trying to help as many people as possible. That's very clear, and I congratulate you for that. But at the same time, we're also hearing that some people don't know that they're eligible for something, right? And I was wondering, again, I'll ask you, Sergio, this, is that, yes, here's this $51 or $52 million a month, was it, or that you said? But is there another 20 million out there in need that we don't know about because people aren't asking?
So I mean, as far as the money's there. Is we need our veterans to come forward. We need them to come and seek help, and we can only do so much, right? But I mean, again, it's that everyone in the community playing a part, and like Ron and Deb all those folks on the ground. VHA is the same way. We all play a part and try to educate our veterans as to what is out there, how they can go. I mean, you mentioned, on the internet, va.gov is a very, very simple website, va.gov. And there's a search engine, and you can learn about any and all the benefits that you want to know about. But someone has to be willing to, and I'm not saying our veterans are not computer savvy, but for those older ones that may not know, they need that help. And that's what we have to do. But again, we need them to come and ask us what you're entitled to. Don't try to figure out what you may or may not be entitled to. Come see us and let us work with you. Let us look at your circumstances and when you serve, and then let us make that decision. But we need them to come forward.
I'm going to ask this question of Deb first, because I think this is right in your sweet spot. Are there peer support, this is James and Kali, are there peer support groups for young veterans returning from war in foreign countries? Of course, today is the first Veteran Day we are celebrated in decades where we don't have an active military involvement in a foreign country. Where does a veteran find these peer support groups or other support groups? How do people reach out and find that?
There are so many veteran support groups that are out there that can help them and have the conversations, because we don't have veteran written on our forehead. Someone doesn't look at me and say, "Oh, you served in combat, you led in command in Iraq, you did these things." That's not written anywhere. So you have to ask, but these veteran groups are all over. I will tell you that even the VFW, we now can allow, it was people in combat who served, or someone who had an immediate family member who served, who can be in the auxiliary, but now we're allowed to have veterans who may not have a U.S. citizenship, but they swore to defend our country, and they served, and they were treated, as you talked about the gold medals that are so delayed, they served in combat for our military and were promised lots of things. These all have organizations. Now, some of the organizations, the way they're designed is their numbers are dwindling. But I can tell you, with all the veterans that we have, if they all belong to some kind of support group, they wouldn't have a problem being able to reference someone. That's what I do. I'm a connector. I belong to multiple veteran group organizations, and I've met most of the gentlemen here before, or I've served with people who work with them. And you just need to connect them to the right resource. And it is as close as your neighbor in many cases. And you just don't know that person belongs. And in our case, we have it in the newspaper all the time, the people who are, I call them the doers, D-O-E-R-S. Those are the ones who actually, in their communities, are constantly out there wanting to help individuals. And this is a community issue, not just for veterans, but when you help the community, and that's how when we get back to our parade, it's businesses, it's your nonprofits like the churches and the other things that bring communities together, and it's your government agencies. And again, when we're doing that, I'll guarantee there's veterans serve in all parts of the government. So you say, well, who's a veteran? Well, I know someone right here.
Ronald Hahn, you wanted to contribute, but also I'd like to get in a question to you are the young veterans that are coming out of these recent deployments, these recent wars, who are probably going to be coming out in some numbers, now, are they more attuned and better at accessing services than, say, their fathers or grandfathers were?
You know what's happening, Daryl, is the great partnerships between the VA and the Department of Defense, with things like electronic health records merging. They're working on a lot of different things that deal with, Sergio mentioned about the Transition Assistance Program, being able to have these military members assessed before they leave the service. So it's seamless. When they leave, they already have compensation ready and ready to go. And there's wraparound services for jobs, education kicks in, VA home loan stuff kicks in. That's the key element to it. When we go to war, with all of my colleagues, when we go to war, we go prepared in order to go fight the battle. We're not going to go there to come in second place. And Dr. Robinson mentioned this word, evolving. which I wanted just to kind of highlight real quickly. That was my biggest thing. Part of the question that you asked earlier, Daryl, was about the fact, why are we getting more people to come out? Because frankly speaking, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, maybe coming after the Vietnam War, where we had bad experiences, the government, the public, people were turned away. People did not want to see anything received from the VA. Well, things have changed now completely. It's no longer about the institution. It's about the veteran. It's veteran centric. And things like presumptive ailments, it changes. There were 8, 10 years ago, there's like 17 today for Agent Orange. We got the burn pit registry for exposure for hazardous things. We'd never think that ever would get approved. That was going on in legislation and litigation, and now there's presumptive ailments for that, as well as probably one of the bigger ones now, I think, is coming up with support for our not only our family members, but I think the big one was for, I think there's one other one that just crossed my pathway.
Well, let's ask Dr. Robinson. Do you know what he's talking about?
Well, I'm not sure what I think I may, but I wanted to just throw in this one, and it goes right in with what Ron's saying and actually what Deb's saying too, and Sergio, in that we have peer support. So peer support, I gave a Veterans Day talk for Judge Morikawa and the Hawaiian Veterans Court 2 days ago. And if you look at the number of people, and I have the lists here, which I will not read, but the court mentors and also the VA staff, those are all peer support folks that are actually helping those veterans. If you come to my facility, we have peer support. These are young men and women who have served in combat or in different arenas and who are there and are working with us, are hired as peer support specialists so that they can help young veterans coming out of different conflicts more recently to readjust, to also understand what they are due in terms of benefits. But it's a reintegration into the community, and it's a way that we can help the community find those resources that Deb's talking about, help people to conquer whatever problems that they may have, and also help them understand what's available to them. So we have peer support. It's there, it works, and it's been very successful.
Okay, so we've only got about 3 minutes left in this show, and I'm beginning to get some very specific questions that I think that are probably too specific to answer on television. One is a request for rental help by a veteran who says he's having trouble getting denied. Someone who's having trouble with benefits, who do they call if they're having trouble getting their benefits? Also a person from the neighbor island saying, please explain how I can get mental health support. In the last couple of minutes, I'd like to ask, starting with Deb Lewis and then Ronald Hahn, as quickly as you can, who do you call? Who are you going to call when you're not getting what you think you're entitled to? Deb?
Number one, I would say contact your veteran support organizations. They have a network. They may have funds. We have an unmet needs program, for example. If you can't meet a bill or something like that, we actually have programs. And we also can do something the others cannot. We can actually be a voice for the veterans to make sure the legislation is passed so those other conditions that Ron talked about are going to be considered. If we don't, I didn't want to join veteran organizations at the end, and if I hadn't joined, I wouldn't know that we would have a voice and make sure that we get heard. But the peer-to-peer and the other ones is how you can get immediate help.
And do they contact you to find that? Like VFW?
If they go to vfw.org or they go Department of Hawaii, there are 20 posts that are scattered throughout all the islands in Hawaii. And if they don't have an unmet needs program right there, for example, the bill paying or in the mental health, chances are I've got members in my organization who are part of those advisors to these other groups, and they do the counseling.
Okay, Ronald Hong, I've only got about 30 seconds left.
Really fast, that'll be at obs at hawaii.gov.
Say it again?
And so obs at hawaii.gov.
obs at hawaii.gov.
Right. And so just give us, we'll refer things out. And you brought up Adam Robinson, Dr. Robinson, you've triggered it. It was the Blue Water Navy. And Daryl, that's a whole different segment for you, Daryl. That's the big one that came about after many years of denial. So OVS at Hawaii.gov.
And very briefly, Sergio Chow, you mentioned that contact the VA, contact us. That's the va.gov, right? That's the best way to do that?
1-800-827-1000 is the easiest way to contact us.
One more time.
va.gov, 1-800-827-1000. If you want to call us here locally in Hawaii, in the Honolulu office, 808-433-0505. 808-433-0505, and make an appointment to speak to one of our counselors.
Okay, thank you all so much. I think you folks have done a great service on top of your service and your service to veterans. We want to thank our viewers for joining us tonight, and we also want to thank our guests, Deborah Lewis, Department Commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hawaii, Adam Robinson, Director of the Veterans of Pacific Islands Healthcare System, Ronald Hahn, Director of the State Office of Veterans Affairs, and Sergio Chow, the Director of Honolulu Regional Office of Veterans Benefits Administration. And again, thank all of our veterans for all of your service. Next week on Insights, the City of Honolulu is changing the rules regarding short-term rentals. Some say the changes are long overdue. Others say the city is going too far. It should be a lively discussion. Please join us then. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.